everyone. I think we're waiting for like one more person. But I think we can just go ahead and get started. I'm gonna send over the agenda, the agenda, just so we can review it. And also wanted to ask if you guys were able to access the meeting minutes from last meeting, and if you reviewed it, if you had any comments for me or good to be approved.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Mari. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Suzanne. So yeah, I was in your offices the other day. I stole candy off your desk. So if it looked a little light, that was me.
Was it my desk? Were you recording the video?
So I took it off someone else's desk?
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh no.
I would have left something better than candy had I known.
Yeah, I was there for the video. I don't think I've ever been to y'all's space before.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, we try to host a lot of events there.
Yeah, it's like quite a view. Now that I know where you guys are, I'm gonna be like bugging you to use space over there.
Call me. Anyone on this phone can call me. Yeah, it's funny. We talked. Some people brought up tall ships on the last call, and the last time they came, we'd had like a viewing for some folks in our office because it's overlooking the harbor. So it was a nice thing to do.
Yeah, it's like you in the right direction too.
Yeah.
We have Sam. Sam's supposed to join us, but he's gonna be a little late, so I think we should just go ahead and get started. But before we do that, I wanted to share with you guys a couple of things that we've been talking about. So I'm gonna share, Mari and Suzanne, if you're okay, I'm gonna share the timelines spreadsheet that the other subcommittee created with you guys, just so that you guys can take a look at it. Hopefully you guys get it. And essentially what they did was they started to put together a spreadsheet of events. It's pretty sparse right now because they were focused more on organizations and contacts for archives. But they did, and I should share it with you guys. You guys should all get access as editors. Share anyway. And then I will also share the link here in the chat. So you guys have that, so that we can kind of begin to shape our meetings, and work through specific goals and ideas we have for our events. So I wanted you guys to take a look at it, and I can also share my screen quickly so that we can look at it.
Genesis, I think we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion to approve them.
I was waiting for us to get a quorum. John is joining now, and once he gets in, we'll have a quorum.
Okay.
Okay, you can make Stan, you can make the motion to approve.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted by Genesis.
Second.
Amazing. Everyone okay with that? Just thumbs up. Amazing. Thank you, guys. All right, so I will share the screen with everyone. Now, can you see that? So they have, what they've done is, let me get bigger. There we go. So they have put together some events, not all events, but events for 250 and 400. And so they also have more recent events like gay marriage being legalized, which is going to get its 20th anniversary in May. They talk about the original event, the anniversary, and they separate it between local, national, or both. And they also have something else. And I also wanted to share other kinds of things that they have. So the curriculum one is empty. You guys can, yeah. But they have an archives sheet that has a lot of contacts. They also have archival subjects, which fits maybe into how we want to work on events, exhibits, and trails for communities, and we want to focus on major events for communities. And they also have this thing called known gaps, which is where they're trying to figure out what's missing from these archives and what's missing, and what's worth, how they can go about finding these missing archives.
In Genesis, these, we have access to these now, or
Yeah, well, I just sent the copy of the timeline, and I can send you guys a copy of their archive subjects and archives afterwards. It's being put in the folder, so you guys will have access to the whole folder. And they're working on that, but they were excited to share it with you guys. So I wanted to introduce that, and I also wanted to say for our next batch of meetings, it's something we had been talking about, but instead of doing individual meetings, we're thinking maybe of doing joint meetings with that subcommittee. And I wanted to run that by you guys to see what you thought. Stop sharing, and I'll send you guys the folder.
Suzanne, you might be on mute.
You're right, Lamari.
And you drop some gems too.
I think that if we're supposed to be relying upon the timeline archives and committee, then for what we're to be doing, then we really do need to meet with them.
In Genesis, is there a way to show that sheet that that we created from the last time? Because I think some of that information that's on this sheet, or some of those categories, we could repopulate on that other sheet. And I don't know, because I think they have some good categories, but I feel like our sheet is a lot more comprehensive.
Yes, I mean, I can share the screen and also share it with everyone right after. So this is a, yeah, if you can see that. So this is events, exhibits, and trails, historical time periods, which Esther worked on, her member Watson. She's great, amazing. So they have they've split it up into a couple time periods: the colonial period, the revolutionary period, and they have some important dates. So Jamestown settlement, Mayflower, Plymouth colony. Then the Revolutionary War period, which we obviously know, so that's 250, early Republic. So, which is great because they'll have Constitution stuff. There's the antebellum period. It might make sense to also do, there's the Civil War, Gilded Age. It might make sense to say the Industrial Revolution as an era instead, depending on how we want to view these time periods. But it's pretty thorough. It goes into the present day, even the contemporary period, post-war and civil rights movements. So it's extensive. And then there's also, I think, can you guys see this? Okay, great. So I think it's a similar template to kind of what the timelines was doing. And this is specifically, oops, I did not miss that. 250 stuff. So the evacuation day. But it's very much more thorough, I would say, in the timelines group, because it talks about, it has ethnic groups available. They need to be expanded, but
like some of these categories, I think, like they have on theirs.
Yeah,
we have theirs. We could fill in the drop downs.
Exactly.
And then I think this will help us identify gaps, because location, like we would use the neighborhoods from their sheet.
Yeah.
Is it open to the public or is it private? Location, duration, is it one time or is it like over a week? So that it helps shape that. The modality, of the event. We thought that was important to identify the modality for the different types of experiences that people would have. And then the time period, I think what Genesis was talking about, will also help us find gaps. And so not only are we could, and then I think with this sheet, we hopefully will be able to do queries. So if you want to find something that is in the civil rights movement, that's focused on LGBTQA+ community, that's family oriented and free, hopefully when this is built out, it'll help us create those type of filters. And I think will also, once with the other categories I put in here, find the gaps. So there's no Cape Verdean things, or there's no things in this language, or there's nothing identified right now in the West End. So we need to maybe incentivize someone to do something in the West End. On what the other commission said, hey, these 5 things happen in the West End, we could somehow illuminate that. And so I think this is not filled out completely. Suzanne had a list of known things that were already there, and we started trying to populate that. And then from Everyone 250, which is an art and culture focused commemoration semi-quincentennial group, they're going to fill out what some of the museums, the ICA, some of the Black and Brown cultural organizations are doing during the time, and also then try to appropriately categorize here. And so we should hopefully by the end of the month, I mean, we'll need some help here because there's, even once we fill out the events, I think there's things that are missing that it is probably going to take all of our investigation to kind of fill this out.
And I wanted to add, I did create the Commemoration Commission website. I did create a Google form so that people can publicize their events. I will do this really quickly. So that just take so you tell the name of the organization, websites, contact information, social media, the neighborhood you service, if the type of leadership you have. Great. And then flyer, when is the event happening, time is the event, a brief description, and then if they're okay with this being publicized on the webpage or on newsletters and social medias. So that's another way to get people to submit this information. I did create an Instagram for this account for the commemoration, and it was banned. So I'm gonna try to work my way around that. But there is a TikTok set up, and then I'm working on Facebook and the rest of them. But yeah. So
why was it banned, Genesis?
It said I was impersonating, falsely impersonating the organization.
Can the Do It department help you?
They can try. I can try to submit a ticket, but I don't think that they will be able to. So I will just try to appeal to Instagram one more time and hope for the best. But I will try to reach out to Do It and to Instagram separately. It is frustrating that they think I'm impersonating the Commemoration Commission, but it's okay. And I think it would be really good to start using social media for those, to advertise these things, and maybe to do like a series, on TikTok, or potentially like 250 things. Tell us about your experience in Boston, or like commemorative things, and you have people do oral histories that way. And that's a kind of way to put it out online to younger crowds. But yeah.
And quick question, Genesis, because I'm kind of using some of the categories from the other sheets to try to solicit Esther's help to populate the other ones. On the second link, there was one that you showed us that had neighborhoods and other ethnic categories. Is that a different link? Because I see we click it, we see both
Oh, yeah, they're two links, two separate links because they don't know why they did that. I can share this with you guys as well. So one is just their timeline, and then the other one is archives and archival subjects. So I'll compile those in one document and I'll share that with you guys. It's already in the copy, so I'll just create a copy of this one and put it in the sheets that you guys already have. So that way you guys don't have to keep getting new information.
Genesis, has there been another meeting with the timelines, archives and curricula, subcommittee since our last meeting?
There was the one last week.
Yeah.
And so what they discussed in that meeting, that was a pretty short meeting. What they wanted to do was invite Jim Rabel, who has When and Where in Boston, and he has like 50,000 pieces of archival information that he's looking to have hosted on a website. And they invited him to give a talk about his database and what he's looking for, to see if the Commemoration Commission is a potential partner for him, so that we can start. So they don't want to start their databases from zero, and they want to find what is already existing that needs support.
And he's an archivist, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, that's all about archives, not about the timeline. Okay.
Yeah, but of course he has it in the complete timeline. Like I said, he has all the trails documented. So he has a lot of information, and they're hoping that if they have that information as a basis, then they can sprint off of that and move forward with other communities and build projects off of his information.
Thank you.
And Hennessy, I had a question about the intake form that you created, that Google form that you just filled out. How are we drawing people's attention to it? I mean, I know it just lives online. Like now that we don't have IG or social, like how can we be helpful? Should we be sharing it out widely, asking people to populate it so that we can create that running list of existing things?
Yeah, so I was gonna have it shared in the Boston Landmarks Commission newsletter because it has a wide reach and on their social media, but it would also be helpful if you guys can compile that, send that out. But it would be helpful if you guys share it out as well.
Yeah, I think that Rev 250 should get their hands on it so that we can send it out to all of our partners because they're the ones that are actually planning these events. So I have a meeting with Jonathan and Bob Allison this week, and I'll mention it to them. Is it so it lives on the website right now, so anybody can go to it? Okay, never mind. I can just send it to them. All right.
But I can share a link with you directly if you would rather just have the link to share out. So yeah, so I will add I'm adding the documents to your spreadsheets now.
Genesis, where does that information go? I mean, do you have a calendar already set up?
I do have a calendar already set up on the same as well. It hasn't been populated yet, but on the same website, there's there's a whole bunch of stuff. So there's that Google form that I showed you guys. There's also another Google form for constituents, so that they can fill out so it'll do this, just through that. Names, your neighborhood, what buildings, objects, landscapes, neighborhood are not protected. Are there people, community organizations in your neighborhood that should be recognized? What events would you like to see? Would you like to participate in some capacity? So that does exist for residents as well. And then I also have the calendar. It's only right now populated with the meetings because nobody's submitted anything yet. But once people start submitting things, then it'll be populated on the calendar, and I will also create an event on the Boston event calendar, so it would appear in both places and also on my webpage as an event to go to. So that would be my intention behind having all of these things, so that people have multiple ways of having these events. And once we figure out the social media stuff, for now, Boston Landmarks Commission can help with that, but social media can be a way to publicize as well. That's my thought process behind it.
And that is, you said it's on the website now?
Mhm. I also share it out, whenever anybody asks, and make sure that they get it, because I think it would be helpful if we have that, we have a process or a place where everything lives, and we're trying to make sure that the Commemoration Commission page can do that. So we're starting slow, but yeah. So we did get some responses for the interest survey whenever I go into the community and make sure that I have people fill that out, just so that we can get some feedback from what the people want to see. And don't know if you guys have that, but I'm going to share that with you now so that you can see what people are saying. This is for comments. Oh, I will share this with you guys, but maybe I think I'll just share the screen and you guys can see what people are asking for. Yeah, great. Okay. So address, but this person wrote and said, with the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution coming, I was interested in commemorating a site long ago demolished near the intersection of Washington Street and Fuller Street in Dorchester. I'm a resident of the neighborhood, and my neighbors also expressed interest in doing so. The location was once the site of Colonel Lemuel's Robinson's Tavern, also known as the Liberty Tree Tavern, and hosted a large banquet for the Sons of Liberty in 1769. And in 1774 to 1775, it was used to hide cannons being smuggled out of Boston on their way to Concord. Not many sites associated with the Revolution in Dorchester, which is why we are so interested in commemorating the site. In particular, we hope to create a plaque or sign that can be posted on the sidewalk near the site. However, we do not know the process for putting one there. Several neighbors recommended I reach out to the Landmarks Commission. Let me know what steps would be required or provide suggestions for who to contact in the city forward. So that was forwarded to me. I reached out to him and let him know that I would be bringing this to you guys at some point. And this is the survey. So a whole bunch of people are saying a whole bunch of structures are at risk in the north end of complete demolition, specifically St. Leonard's Road. They would like that recognized. And then it talks about their Italians for October Italian Heritage Month. They would like to see 3 deckers streetscapes protected, and more events in neighborhoods other than downtown. They would like all 18th century buildings to be landmarked. They would like to see Maud Clooney hair, Black women in general, Latinx immigrants from the 60s, LGBTQIA communities recognized, and they would like to do walking tours of every neighborhood. They would like Mattapan Historical Society and more things for Women's Month. They also said the Parkman Memorial by Jamaica Pond needs accessible walkways, benches, and signage that interprets the memorial, the man, and speaks to the indigenous people who inhabited the area as well. This person said, Shirley Eustace Place offers a vantage point to look at enslaved Africans of the 18th century, but also the many immigrant communities that settled in Boston over the last 200 years. They'd like to see Barry Gaither, the founder of the National Center for Afro-American Artists, the NCAA, but maybe he's already been on it, they said, and Ina Fox, manager of Roxbury Heritage State Park. They'd also like a commemoration of the Haitian Revolution of 1793, which I thought was fascinating, especially because there was Boston involvement in Haiti at the time, and its aftermath for African Americans and their fight for freedom, and later relevance to the Haitian community in Massachusetts. She said it's not particularly relevant, but it is, because there is a grave of a person who was enslaved by one of the Perkins brothers in Haiti brought to Boston. So they also said our ongoing quest to bring adaptive reuse to 42 to 44 Shirley Street to tell the stories of enslaved people of Shirley Place. And
quick question, Genesis, and maybe we covered it last meeting. I apologize for not there. Just listening to the diversity of some of the remarks, and I think in letter that you showed us. Did we have a conversation around, or is it even necessary to have a conversation around? All right, maybe my third question is, or are we really talking about semantics when we say that we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution? Or are we celebrating 250 years of America? And have we talked about what we are actually doing? Because I think the first sheet that we showed from the other group gives me the indication that we're talking about 250 years of America. I thought we were talking about 250 years of America, but I could be just making an assumption, and maybe we just haven't established what we're doing. Are we commemorating an anniversary that happened 250 years ago, and the things in its proximity, are we celebrating 250 years?
That's a good question. I would say that it does matter, semantics, right? It is Revolution 250, so I would say that we're celebrating the revolution that led to the founding of America, or to the United States, and not necessarily the nation at the time, because technically it wasn't the nation yet. So I think that's also how the state and other parties like the national parks is thinking about it. They talked to Liza a little bit, Liza Stearns. She said that they're framing it a lot around the questions that were being asked during the revolution about democracy and about freedom and liberty, and how that continues into the present day, but not necessarily about the founding of the United States. So I think it's up to interpretation, but I think you get something more fruitful if it's about the revolution and its ideals, and not necessarily about the founding of the United States, because there's inherent, I think, violence towards Indigenous people. I don't know. It depends, I think, but I think there's a lot of merit to the revolution, and not necessarily the founding of the United States.
I think a good way of looking at it is the 250th is a celebration on the independence from Britain, because that's what it was. For the colonists, it wasn't any independence for Indigenous or Black people. It was basically the colonists. So, I mean, I think that's what the 250th is. It's a celebration of the independence from Britain. So anything that that deals with that, I think, is important to include with that. But I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
Because I guess I asked a question, and thank you for those answers and kind of perspective, that there might be certain, if our charge is to celebrate the American Revolution, then there are other activities that are occurring that are not celebrating the American Revolution, that are celebrating our country at 250 years old, which is different, and the commemoration of something or a series of events 250 years ago, and I think they're just kind of mixed things. Even on that first list that you sent us, what's missing? I mean, there's things that exceed far beyond the colonial period that's added on there. So just if you weren't around 250 years ago, are we not raising up your event?
Yeah,
Mari, so I think this fundamental question, and I appreciate you raising it. And I think it would be helpful to clarify whether there is, so I don't have the ordinance language open in front of me, but I think if there is specific guidance in there, we need to be aware of it. And if there is not, I think that we should actually decide what we think is most appropriate. I believe that we will have a greater impact and get people thinking more and hopefully leave something more meaningful behind if we are commemorating 250 years of America's story and not just marching through sort of 250 years ago today version of this history. And I think we would be aligned with the way that, for example, America 250 has decided to approach this story. But we're more likely to engage audiences citywide and engage visitors if we're connecting the past meaningfully to experiences over the whole sweep and to the moment that we're in right now.
I have the ordinance open, and as we see now, Genesis has it up. It does not say anything about commemorating the history that happened 250 years ago. It's very broad. I think you're right, Nat and Amari, we should be focusing on 250 years of history, not 250 anniversary events. That's how I read it.
I thought it too, and I just didn't want to make sure, I just want to make sure I want to level set myself, because just hearing those comments, I think it appeared to me that there was an interpretation that people were getting from whatever they were reading, that framed it 250 years ago ish, blah blah blah, versus how I thought we were framing it, which I think it sounds like we're mostly in agreement.
Yeah, and just to echo on everybody, it's a real challenge, because when, you know, and I appreciated when I think Hennessy, you sent out the Revolution bicentennial materials. We're kind of like in the shadow of the bicentennial was 200 years ago. All this happened. Let's recreate it. Let's celebrate it. And here we are at the 250th, and it's there is a segment of the population that want to do that, and that definitely is part of this. But it's not just that. I think what in the Park Service, you know, Liza and I, we've been really focusing on how do we highlight that this is 250 years of ongoing revolution. It didn't start and end 250 years ago. It was this opportunity that was defining this concept that we are still struggling over and debating and engaging with. I mean, even in the warrant that was brought up, and it brings up George Middleton, who is just the second generation of multiple generations of abolitionists and Black leaders in the Black community of Boston. You know, Faneuil Hall, why do abolitionists want to meet there and advocate for the rights of all Americans? Is because that's where the revolution was such a prominent role. So they're building off of that ideal. And it continues on. And you have, again, trying to highlight stories of what is it, city ensure local minority women, LGBTQ plus businesses are engaged, people are heard. I mean, there's Gay Town Meeting in Faneuil Hall. So it kind of, it's that cumulative ongoing revolution that we're all part of, and where is it going from here?
And I mean, I think a lot of people are looking at or are thinking about 250 because it's coming up, but I think even here, you know, this person is talking about all the Hill neighborhood in Roxbury, and how it shows an attachment to history, and she highlights, for example, the Aerosmith apartment celebrating its 50th anniversary. First openly lesbian candidate elected to state legislature, and Angelina Well Grimke. She is one of the more recent Grimke family members that Boston had, but it goes way back into the abolitionist time. So it's a really cool, you know, thread. But so I think a lot of people, a lot of people who were commenting are also people who are studying 250, like Dr. Francis, great guy. It gave me so much information, but I know that he specifically is focused on 250. So not necessarily representative. These are just the people that have been reached, but I think there is definitely going to be more interest in not just 250, but 400.
Yeah, and part of the reason that my, I guess, secondary reason for asking that, I think when we get to the point where we populate some of the events that are happening, there are ongoing events, and I'm kind of, he can't tell, but I'm looking at John Borders. There are ongoing events and activations that occur that could be invited to illuminate their event on the 250 year and actually meet an audience there. So I'm just thinking hypothetically, like a BAMS Fest. I'm not sure we would ever put BAMS Fest on here, but BAMS Fest in 2026, if Catherine was and BAMS Fest was invited into the conversation, the discourse, could I can imagine them conceptualizing BAMS Fest as a 250 event in a way that it might not normally be on here during 2026. And so that's why I was just trying to get clarity on, if there was a charge specific towards our commission around the celebration of, I mean, it's clear to me now, but we're celebrating all 250 years. I also found out 2026 is Front Porch's 10th anniversary. So it's the only Black theater company in town. And so their contribution to the 250 as Boston's only Black theater company, blah, blah, blah. And so they just need to be invited into these circles, and we could probably fill some gaps once we have that chart filled out, and by just inviting them to participate in it. And so I think that makes sense.
I think that's great. Just to chime in.
John?
Yeah, I was going to jump in really quickly and ask, how are we measuring success? Have we determined what a successful 250th celebration looks like? What are we hoping to get out of this? And I bring that up because from the city side, that may be something different than what the different organizations on this call represent. And I'm trying to figure out if there's a balance in what success looks like for you versus what success may look like in my seat. So I would love to even take some time. And if this has already been identified, then forgive me. But I think trying to figure out, are we trying to satisfy the constituency who call Boston or Greater Boston home, and to activate the different neighborhood, the 23 neighborhoods? So as Hennessy is looking at, from a city of Boston standpoint, we look at 23 neighborhoods. If there was one of those 23 that wasn't directly touched by the 250th, are we then using that white space as an opportunity to activate and to tell new stories? Is there a balance between the historical context of some of those priority spaces that were directly tied to this, i.e. your Beacon Hill, your South End, whereas, JP or Roslindale or Mattapan may not have had as such a role, a prominent visible role, is there, from a strategic standpoint, are we still kicking the tires on what it looks like? And this is really the information gathering element of all of it, because I know I'm on other calls with many of you having the same conversation at the state level and trying to figure out how the city plays into a larger relationship with the state. And then because the nation is also looking at us as kind of helping to lead this charge, it's just adding a little bit more clarity on and I won't say metrics, but some of the things that we're hoping from an objective standpoint to kind of get out of this, because having that as a North Star at least helps to frame my contributions, my work, and my time. So would love any feedback we have in that regard.
So the answer is no, we didn't discuss that on the last call. John, I think that's up for discussion. And if you and the city do have goals in mind, let's lead with them and then add to it. Some of the things we discussed is, per the charge, you know, how are we creating wealth? Like, what's the investment in local owned businesses? You know, what's the investment across neighborhoods engaged? Is it new visitors? Is it engaging Bostonians and trying to get them from one part of town to another? I mean, we could go a million different ways. I think for me, like, I'm just going to speak personally, the part of the charge that stuck out to me was investment in local diverse businesses, and how do we use those visitors to get revenue generated too for the city, because that's a clear way of measuring one piece of success. It could be number of groups or identities engaged in the 250. It could be a number of things. So I think if you have some in mind, we could build off of them, but it should be if neighborhoods, people, you know, wealth, all of that.
My man, is your name Ferris? How do I pronounce your name?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Ferris brought up a point of the celebration of the 250th revolution versus a kind of encompassing 250th historical context storytelling narrative. Is there a possibility that those coexist? That there's a deep tie to, you know, the tradition of what, you know, a subset of folks are looking for in terms of the, I won't say the purist, but those who are looking to tell the actual story of, you know, how the revolution took place versus the more narrative and imaginative approach of a more inclusionary way of, you know, telling more common stories in those white spaces, and like the opportunity to kind of engage and bring in those different crowds. I think the way you talked about it in terms of the baseline metrics of spending, heads and beds, local tourism, I think that's obviously where my mind goes from my seat. But I know trying to satisfy the different groups that have already kind of self-identified, said they want to be a part of it, have already raised some money, already have, like, you know, input and some momentum. You know, how are we positioning how they are kind of brought into this question.
Yeah, I think, John, I think in from how I see it, I think the opportunity for 250 years of stories, is the opportunity to tell counter stories. Because I think to me, I think it's a lot to expect an organization that has a perspective on a reenactment to expand that perspective in order to be current without, like, stepping in some landmines. I think people should do the best that they can in their wheelhouse of telling the story. And I think some other organization who does something else in a chronological or in an ethnic way should do the best that they can. And those two things side by side is the narrative, because it seems to me quite difficult for us to reenact Paul Revere's ride and then include 17 chapters and individuals and stories if the organizations that is leading that's not their wheelhouse. And so if they're able to take on the responsibility or the opportunity to tell a comprehensive tale of a period in time, then they should do it. And if they're not, they shouldn't do it. They should just do what they do and let someone else tell that counter story, and let them be in relationship to each other. Because I think people shouldn't be canceled or have to turn themselves into a pretzel when that's not what they do. And other people who do that should do that, and then we should be able to help people curate a story based on the epics that those categories, and that's how I feel about it. And I think the other thing that you said, and Celia, I agree with you. I think the next step is once we fill out these events, is to identify small businesses and restaurants that are in proximity to where these events are being held. And so if you're doing a query and you're going to this event on February 4th and it's in this neighborhood, it automatically populates with all the businesses that are around there so that you can shop and eat and spend in those neighborhoods. Like, that's the next step of this, to me, this sheet. If we could fill it out as much as we can and then bring in ABEC and BECMA into the conversation, and the chamber and the main streets, so that they can help populate where the exact locations of these activations are happening, so that there's a recommendation and a kind of a comprehensive lens in which people who are interested in the thing based on the identification of the date can eat in somewhere that's in proximity. That's what I think our charge could be once we get as many dates as we can, is to identify businesses around those places.
Mhm.
And then in some cases do matchmaking, that if, I think John, Celia, others, if they know that some of these events are going to need paper plates, to matchmake them with the paper plate company that's in Chelsea. I'm just making this stuff up, right? Like, if there's a way that we could do some matchmaking once the dates are identified and the sponsors of those dates haven't secured their vendors, to be able to matchmake them with those vendors.
I have a quick question. So for the 250th, are we responsible or charged with coordinating events, creating events? Because the 250th is right around the corner. And I'm just not clear if what our exact charges when it comes to events specifically that requires a tremendous amount of planning. Are we creating the events, or are we planning them, or are we just coordinating them?
Yeah, so the ordinance says that the goals of this subcommittee include producing recommendations for events and exhibits, and determining how to promote historic anniversaries and acquire related public and private funds. And by supporting the formation of historical trails and tours that extend beyond downtown. None of those words actually mean create. So it's hard to say. I think we're gathering, we're recommending things, and then the question is which organizations, which departments in the city are we passing that off to so that it becomes something? Because it doesn't seem like this is where it's going to be produced, where it's going to happen.
It also
Thank
says.
you. The reason why I was asking is because, some things, like if we can recommend things, I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. That's awesome. Just because some things require a tremendous amount of notice. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking 250th, that's like a celebration that the whole country is going to be celebrating, right? Not just Boston. The independence, basically, the 250th anniversary of the colonists, rebelling against the crown, basically. So I mean, in my mind, I'm picturing, most eyes will be on Boston. This is where it began, this area. Is there fireworks planned? Because, I mean, I just see this incredible fireworks show, because that's what people like to see, visual things. And if not so, I think that has to be done immediately, because that takes time. To get the right people, the right vendors for but around that, you have Harbor Island tours, you have all these things around the harbor. And those are the things that you need to be done immediately, because that's, unless any of you do fireworks or something like that, that's something that you have to, talk to the vendors about and get that planned out. And that's why I asked the question, what our task is, because some of these things require a tremendous amount of notice to get done. And if it's not done already, let's hope it's not too late.
Bears, I'm going to put the link that I think Rev 250 have. I mean, so there's a series of events that are starting in 2024 that are known. And that spreadsheet that we went over, I think we started populating there's at least 10 events that are started in 2024. And some of those events started last year, the Boston Tea Party anniversary. There was two that I think I can't, I'm brain freezing on one, but I remember the Boston Tea Party anniversary that happened in December. And then there was something in November. Suzanne, I'm looking at you. I don't remember. So there is a bunch of stuff. I know next year, Embrace, for example, is doing the 60th anniversary of the 1965 Freedom Rally March from as a part of the 250 events. So there is a beginning of the list of things, and then of course Boston Pops is doing fireworks and et cetera. But I'm gonna put that in the chat so we both have that as everyone has that as a reference point. But you'll see that most of them are on this list are centered around the colonial. Most of those on this list will be like colonial period events.
So, we can go back to I hate to do this, but if we can go back to the charge, Genesis, it also says, and I know we talked about this last time, excuse me, acquire related public this committee was supposed to be acquiring those funds.
I'm sorry, Sharon, I think you cut off for me. I'm not sure if everybody else heard that, but can you repeat it?
Well, I was saying that in the goals, it also says that we're required to produce recommendations for acquiring related public and private funds to benefit tourism, historic sites, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all recommendations that we as a subcommittee come up with, correct? Including the acquiring of funds, so we don't actually have to acquire the funds. That's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So I think that, I know it says within the first year of convening, which hasn't been that long ago, that we need to produce an initial actionable plan. We should probably decide as a group that we need to do that sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
In order for the city to actually have a recommended roadmap.
Just back to the point on like coordinating or designing our own events. I think probably our charge is inclusive of both. I think that we don't want to move into a space where we're recommending things that are at odds with key organizations around the city who are already planning events or trying to figure out how to contribute to the larger commemoration. We want to identify where there are blind spots, perhaps, but we also want to take responsibility for recommending places where broader citywide ownership of a particular moment is necessary in order to elevate it. So, for example, July 4th, 2026, I don't think, so my organization operates the old State House, so we're always part of the work of commemorating independence. That's planned out of the city's special events office. But I think we need to imagine a really ambitious program for July of 2026. And I think if this committee is not making a recommendation, who else will be doing it? So I think we want to be coordinating, but also identifying where contributing a vision for a particular event will be helpful, or making a recommendation for particular events or exhibits. So just thought on that.
And I just realized that the public notice that I sent, the official notice also included Boston 400 logo, branding, marketing. I don't know if that's something we want to do. Relevant into how we want to begin to plan and what we want to begin to take ownership of. So I'll put it out there. We don't have to focus on it now, but I would say, what do you guys think? What is the appropriate timeline for this to begin doing this actionable plan? And do you all think that it needs to be broken down into smaller groups instead of larger subcommittee meetings? Because I know that other subcommittee, they have subgroups within the subcommittee. So some people are focused on the curricular aspect of things. Some people are focused specifically on archives. And that works for them, but that doesn't have to be what you guys do. But I just wanted to put something out there for ideas on how to begin producing these things on a smaller scale to then have something tangible.
Genesis, how many people do we have on our subcommittee?
I think it's 14 or 15, if I'm not mistaken.
So I feel like the people that are on here today, thank you, everybody, are the people that have gone to the last couple of meetings.
Mhm.
So I don't even know that we would know how we could break up if we don't know, you know, who else has the time to help in our efforts.
Um, I think I've been kind of taking that where there are some people that are just either they can't make the day ones, they can't make the night ones. Right, thank you guys. Or, you know, they, for whatever reason, may not be able to come. So I just assume with the people who are coming frequently enough to be on top of things, are probably the people who should be stewarding these conversations. And I think that's how the other subcommittees are functioning as well.
I think who's here now is kind of like a subcommittee. Anyway, I mean, I think we should just jump in and just start knocking stuff out that we're tasked with. I mean, I think because we don't have a whole lot of time. I mean, the 400th, we have a little bit more time, but we're talking about the 250th. This, we don't have a whole lot of time to produce all these recommendations. So I just think we should just jump right in and start knocking stuff out.
I know, you know, Nat's organization, Red Spaces, mine, National Park Service, like there's a couple things that we're already kind of involved with. I'm curious if there's a way to just kind of amplify, like, you know, we were taking stock of things that are going on, maybe some things that could be planned or worked on is like, how do you build off of some existing things as a foundation? So we're not necessarily starting from scratch, although I love the fireworks idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think that's similar. I think, you know, I'm involved in Charlestown conversations. I think they as a neighborhood are really taking a charge because of Bunker Hill and all the 250 stuff they have going on. And they did a lot of the work to combine all of the organizations that have a vested interest. So I know they have like the Cincinnati Society, they have the Daughters of the Revolution, Sons of the Revolution, I think. They have both the Historical Society, the Dragon Society. They have like, it's like 18 groups. And they've kind of taken the charge to then invite us into their space to collaborate with them and what they're working on. And my hope is that we can, as the city of Boston, publicize and help in any way we can. But they are pretty organized in ways that other organizations or other groups of people are not necessarily. So I don't know. I'm working with them to help advertise, help plan, but they are taking the charge on that. So I think we're gonna have to figure out how to strike a balance with groups that are already doing the fundraising, already doing the labor, already planning things, and groups that have not but should, or groups that or events that we should be focusing on that maybe there's a a known gap there. So I think it would be helpful to figure out what the balance for that looks like and how to make sure that's support and not an overstep.
I do like, and maybe I was reading into this, Nate. I do like once we're able to identify a good list of events to illuminate certain events that have a little bit more universal appeal, as a few of the ones that are highlighted, and like, you know, in 2026 it is like the big year, like, and I'm wondering if our group would consider, you know, putting a ring around, you know, there's all these things leading up to the Olympics, and then it's the Olympics, right? And so when the opening games begin and when the opening games end, and like, I'm wondering if this committee would consider differentiating what's an opening game and when the Olympics actually begin and end. By default, it might begin and end around the 4th of July. I think some of us posit that first Independence Day happened in Juneteenth, where every single American was guaranteed independence. And so this idea of Juneteenth to July 15th as the opening and closing games of the period, and everything else is pre and post game stuff. But we're really talking about the big dances, June 15th to July 15th. And so like, I'm throwing that out there as something for us to consider, and like everything else is great and we'll illuminate them and rah and all the things with our whole heart. But if we think about, what's the opening and closing games of the Olympics, I think by default, if we don't do that, it will just mostly be July 4th. And we could have this Juneteenth to July 15th month as kind of a framing. So, something for consideration for us to think over, and maybe I'll bring it up at the next meeting again so that people have a chance to let this resonate.
I think that for some things and for some events that they will just fall on the city. And that will be, we will create the recommendations, but it'll have to be the Office of Tourism, Sports and Entertainment, right? The Office of Arts and Culture that really help undertake and produce those events and those activities. So it'll have to definitely be a collaborative, much more collaborative with other city departments, so that these things actually come to fruition. It's a little difficult now.
Genesis, as the coordinator of the commission itself, do you have any recommendations, not to use that word too many times, but do you have any recommendations on when you think that we should have this plan out to the mayor?
That's a good question. I mean, I think sooner rather than later to have at least a first draft. Maybe 3 months for a first draft. Because I understand that it will probably take a good amount of time to compile the events and to put together ideas for things that actually make sense and that will actually attract things. And like Celia said, we want to identify those businesses that we want to interact with. So I think I say 3 months. That might be too short of a time. But maybe 3 months to start gathering and check in, and then see where we are from there.
So by Juneteenth, before Juneteenth, we should have a draft.
Mm-hmm.
And who's going to be the drafter of the plan?
Good question. I guess I would. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's again unclear, and I think my role, I guess, is to support how I can. So if that needs to be something that I transcribe, then I can do that.
Okay. And when is the next meeting, or when are we talking about doing a joint meeting with the Trails Subcommittee?
So the next meeting for you guys.
Timelines, sorry, we're Trails,
Yeah.
timelines.
So the next meetings are scheduled in April, and they have a visitor coming, so I will just open the schedule, the calendar. So their meeting is April 3rd, and they're gonna have Jim Brabble presenting his stuff. And then timelines, events, exhibits, and trails is Monday the 8th, of April. But I've been thinking about the meetings, and I was hoping to get you guys' insight on what you think is best practice. Because I know that the ordinance charges us to meet once a month, but I do want to make sure that when we're meeting, we're making something of that time. So that's why I haven't sent out any scheduling for the next 3 months or anything like that, because I figured we might want more flexibility to have joint meetings once we do this first round of meetings. By the next commemoration commission meeting, we might instead think we would rather have joint meetings. And that would still be potentially just once a month, or have on and off joint meetings, so that you guys have your own meeting one month and then a joint meeting next.
And can you remind me and the group here who the co-chairs are of that committee?
Yes,
Is it Joe Bagley?
it's Joe Bagley and Bob Allison.
Okay, great. That's what I thought. Okay.
And I even think that, legislation and preservation tools has interest in meeting, because they also want to work on, squares and streets and figure out how main streets can be part of the charge that they're trying to undertake. So I think there's overlap even with all three groups, but I know that there's the most overlap with you guys and TAC. So, yeah, maybe we can do one with just you guys and just them, and then another month was combined. But I don't know. I figured I would defer to your ideas. Yeah.
Are we allowed to contact Joe and Bob to ask them about their work?
So, good question. I made sure to verify with the law department what was allowable. So I think should be fine if co-chairs contact co-chairs. There just cannot be a quorum of subcommittees emailing back and forth, because that violates open meeting law. But as long as you guys email under, I guess under 8 people, or for a quorum under maybe 16, but just to keep it safe, under 8 people, I'm CC'd on everything. I think it should be okay.
Okay. I'm just wondering if we're trying to push our goals forward, and their goals is 6 months and ours is a year, are we gonna be running up against them not reaching their goal in time if we're shortening our period of time? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. I saw it. I think I can email all 4 of you together. And I mean, if anybody else is interested, I would not mind adding anyone to that email thread, and then you guys can open it up for discussion. They are thinking they would like to also, in 3 months from their last meeting, have a draft timeline that's able to be used by at least the commission. So not necessarily presented to the mayor, but presented to you guys. So maybe you guys don't do 3 months, maybe you do 6.
Or maybe we can draft the plan without putting the actual events in it.
Exactly.
Do all the other things around it and then just put those in.
Yeah.
You mentioned the logo and all that. Did you want to discuss that?
Yeah, I mean, we have time to discuss it. The marketing, I was hoping to start with social media. We don't have Instagram, but we do have the rest of that stuff. I started a newsletter. There's nothing to put in it yet, but I did have a newsletter for people who wanted to sign up. But as far as logos or branding and things like that, I didn't wanted to open that up to you guys. And also, of course, any other things you guys think we should be doing for marketing.
I think that Do It should be involved, obviously. You have a design team right there, and they'll probably, I would think the city would want to mirror what the current branding is, which would be nice. I know the state is going to be releasing a logo most likely on April 2nd, or showing it to the tourism community across Massachusetts at the governor's conference. So maybe we wait until we see what Massachusetts comes up with, and then show that to the people and Do It and say, we need a logo.
Okay.
And here are the logos that are out there in Massachusetts. We know Rev 250 has a logo, and all of our entities have logos as well. So, but
Yes.
it shouldn't say 250. In my personal opinion, I don't think.
Yeah.
And Suzanne, Do It is the internal marketing folks.
The technology
Yeah.
team.
They have all the graphic designers there and all the technology people. They also do all the back end programs like PeopleSoft and all that kind of stuff. Big department.
But otherwise, I mean, while we, wait for logos and things, is there, outside of, sending out those forms and sharing the webpage and, is there an outreach that I could be doing that we think might be helpful for kind of marketing commemoration?
I mean, if you want to get that form out for people to start populating the events and what they'd like to see, I would certainly work with your counterparts in neighborhood services, definitely, and main streets as well. And the Landmarks Commission has a big reach as well. It looks like you've already reached the local historical societies.
Definitely, and they found me for sure. They're on top of their stuff, at the very least with local government. But they are hoping to be more engaged. Of course, I think there are a lot of constituents who are trying to be more engaged in the process, but it's hard to, and this is all public as well, so they know that these things are happening, but it's hard to meaningfully engage them outside of just them sitting here and watching when we don't have anything for them to do yet, anything for them to give to or to comment on.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Nat.
I was just going to say, in addition to neighborhood services, is it possible that we could rely on some members of the city council to help invite their constituents to engage?
Yes. So we have Council President Lejeune on the commission. She's very active, so she's great. She's a great resource. And then so I think she would be open and has sent people who are interested. So I think she would be very open to advertising. And I know that Councilor Fernandez Anderson was also advertising that event we had way back in November because it was in her district in Roxbury. So I think that as we start to pick things up and get more engagement with neighborhoods, they're definitely open and willing to.
Speaking of neighborhoods, I just thought of something I talked with the state about as well when trying to figure out how to reach all cities and towns. And I'm thinking of the same way for the city is if we have, as Amari has suggested, maybe a month period between Juneteenth and July 15th, could there be neighborhood celebrations in every neighborhood similar to like the trolley tour at Christmas time or the mayor's coffee hours, that kind of thing, where every community has a big celebration. And Ferris, there are fireworks, whether they're small or big, in every neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think it's a great way to engage residents. Like we said, we wanted to, remember our first meeting, we talked about how if we did something like the Midnight Ride, how we would engage every community. But I would agree. I think that bringing the celebration to them might be more, and we could expand that time period even, because I know like Carnival happens in August, and so do a whole bunch of the festivals, and
Right.
May 18th is like the Haitian Flag Day. So I think we could be really intentional that time period in the spring to summer. There's so much happening for so many communities. I think it would be a great.
Or even those big events can be seen as a way to celebrate and have a 250 theme, but not really celebrating the 250th anniversary, but 250 years of history, something like that.
Yeah, so it's like a thematic, the ideologies of the revolution instead of 250 years, right? Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think it's doable, especially if it's made up, I guess.
Just want to play the devil's advocate here. I mean, really, it's like we really are celebrating 250 years because Boston's history is older than this country. you know? So in actuality, we're only celebrating a small piece of Boston's history. I mean, that's just playing the devil's advocate for the 250th anniversary because Boston, you know, unlike many parts of this country, has a colonial history before the country was, well, before the revolution against England. And so, I mean, I understand not, you know, you really not celebrating the 250th, but that's really what it is, isn't it? Isn't it the 250th anniversary? Isn't that what it actually is? Right? So I'm not understanding why we wouldn't just use that, the 250th, like the actual 250, because that's what we're celebrating. I mean, because Boston's real celebration is their 400th. You know, for me, that's the big one, because there's not many places here in this country that can celebrate 400 years, you know? So, I mean, but I'm just confused to why we kind of don't want to, you know, celebrate that number, 250. So that's all.
Well, I agree, Ferries, and I think that Genesis, I don't know if you're able to help us out, but again, back to the charge, it says for us to be focused on events falling between 2022 and 2026, which doesn't make sense to me either, because we should be focusing on 2030. I think it might have been a typo.
I think it was a typo as well, because everything else talks about 2030. You know, because it says timelines, archives, and curriculum will be doing key occasions until 2030. The other one, it doesn't even say, but if the commission itself, the large commission, is to be meeting until 2030, then you guys would have nothing to do if everything is done for 2026. So I would agree that it's a typo.
So yeah, we have more to do. You're right, Ferries.
Yeah, I mean, I whether we read it as a typo or not, I think it's more urgent that we formulate an initial action plan for events that will happen in the initial window leading up to 2026, right? I mean, there's a lot more work that needs to go into thinking about the 400th, and we have a little more time if we're seeing them as separate undertakings or somewhat distinct undertakings. So taking a little bit of extra time to think more about the 400th might be useful. I think if we can just focus on 2026 in this initial draft plan, that feels like it would be helpful.
I think that makes the most sense for us as well. Yeah, and so I mean, we're not going to get started now, but I can connect you, Suzanne, and Amari to Joe and Bob. I mean, get that ball rolling, and then I think I've shared a folder with people. So if you guys want to begin populating those folders, those documents, we can do that as well to begin with, and then I can reach out to. Well, I guess we'll wait until we see what Massachusetts is doing for their logo, and then I'll reach out to do it to see what we think for branding. But yeah, I mean, I think 250 is distinct, and that's why people will be focusing on things that happened 250 years ago, specifically 1770, whatever, right? But I also think that it's kind of like I see it as like a fluid thing, where Timelines, Archives, and Curriculum is focusing on this 10-year period, 2023 to 2030, or 2021, we'll say, to 2031. And because there will be so many anniversaries that are not necessarily 250 or 400, there will be some focus, and also because it's the touristic aspect of 250 will be a thing, but there's going to be a focus of 250, and we'll go with those, and also 400. And in 400, I think they're thinking that 400 will encompass everything, including the more recent things. But I don't see why we can't start now, because there are some anniversaries that are happening now for 400. So it's kind of like it's a dual charge.
Hmm.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, I think if we don't have anything else, then we can wrap up early. And then I can make sure I send everything out to you guys by email, make sure that you guys have access to all of those documents. I can also send out the forms if you guys would like to have access to those. And I will make sure to email you guys so that we can set up a meeting between you guys and Timelines, Archives, and Curricula. And then at some point, we'll be doing scheduling for the next batch. More fixed agendas. So there's nobody in the public, so there's no need for public comment. If we just want to adjourn, we can do that.
We need a motion?
Hmm?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Amazing. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Genesis. You're doing a lot of work. Thank you so much.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Thank
Have
you
a
so
great
much.
day. Bye,
Take
everyone.
care.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone. Be
everybody.
safe.
Thanks for all your
See
input.
ya.